I'm sitting down here with JV Gach, or Jules, to be more specific,
Yeah.
and Jules here has a novel coming out soon from Off Limits Press. It's called Epiphany, and that drops December 9th. We'll be discussing that because I was lucky enough to read an advanced copy of it. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you for
um,
reading.
and there's going to be another book from you coming out a year from now called Spooky Lovers, which I'm interested to chat about as well. So, how are you doing, Jules?
I'm so thankful for you for doing this.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for coming on. We scheduled this very quickly. Originally when you reached out, you told me that, you had this book coming out soon. But whenever we could schedule it, that's fine. I saw it was from Off Limits Press, which, as you know, I'm a very big fan of. You are in really good company with the authors that have been
Yes.
published there. And considering it was coming out December 9th, I'm like, let's squeeze this in. Let's try to promote the book. So first question I have for you before we talk about your journey with Off Limits Press, the way I like to frame this is, when it comes to Epiphany, the book that's coming out, novel or novella? Is it a long novella or is
Right.
it a?
It's right there
It's right.
in the limit.
Okay,
It's
okay.
too long to be a novella, but then it's maybe a bit too short to be a novel, but it's it's
To,
right
to,
there.
to me, it's
It's
a perfect
200
length.
pages.
Yeah,
So
like for me, if I could watch a movie that's like 80 to 90 minutes, perfect. If I can read a book that's around 200 pages, great. But the way I like to frame this is you're at a party, just meeting a random stranger, and a friend walks up and says, "Hey, Jules here. She wrote a book and it's coming out soon." They ask you what it's about. What do you tell them?
I will have a problem. I will have to be sure what type of party and what type of friend this is, because I
Mhm.
don't think Epiphany is a book for everyone. So I would probably just go with the mystery part of it. There's a woman who is pregnant, and she has just found out that her wife has died by suicide. But she refuses to believe she would have done so voluntarily. So she just dives deep into her late wife's podcast and interviews, emails, letters, notes, trying to figure out what happened. And then she uncovered some uncomfortable truths.
Mhm. Yeah, and by the way, what a way to start to start a book. I think probably in the first page you mention that someone has died by suicide, and it's really gut-wrenching. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I've already told you I really enjoyed this, and guess what? I don't really like what I call grief horror, but I really loved this book, so I am very excited to talk to you about it. And I was thrilled that I was able to be, one of the first to read it. So thank you so much. Um, so I want to talk about your journey with Off Limits Press, and how, well, was it sort of a blind submission? Was it a submission call and you submitted this book to them and you got accepted? How did that process work?
Well, they had an open call for novels, and I submitted it to them because I love Off Limits Press. When I first started reading indie horror, they had just started out, and I bought two books that really changed the way I saw what I could write in horror. That were Crossroads
Yes.
by Lauren Hightower
Laurel
and
Hightower, yes. And Haley Piper. See, like I said, you are in really good company at
yes.
Off Limits Press. Yeah, I mean, and there's a bunch of others. There's, Tim McGregor, J.A.W. McCarthy. They published so many great authors, and now you're Oh, and you have that one too, and now you're a part of that Rolodex, and that
Yes,
that has to feel exciting, right?
it was really exciting. Also, I knew Epiphany would fit in their catalog because I knew it was grief horror,
Mhm,
as you said. There was also some body horror
mhm,
in there, folklore, it's queer. So I thought it would fit right there. And I was really excited when I got Waylon Jordan, the editor-in-chief, contact me saying he had loved the novel and he wanted to offer publication because I was actually having a copy on my off limits mag. So I was thrilled. It was a year and a half ago, so it's been a long time, but things take time in
mhm,
publishing, and I'm so happy to join this group of awesome writers that I love and that have shaped the way I write.
mhm. That's great. So it sounds like you started out as a fan of the works published by the press, and now you're actually a part of that entire catalog. So that's really amazing. And I've told you before, I'm a big Whalen fan. He has no idea who I am, but as a publisher, I think he's wonderful, and he picks some really great projects to publish. So again, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm also having a short story on the next anthology next year, March.
Wonderful.
So I'm also really thrilled about that story. It's called Sins of My Sisters,
Okay.
and it's a ghost story with nuns.
Very nice. And I do want to talk to you about your short works too, because I actually looked into that, but I don't want to stray away too much from Epiphany now because um one of the aspects that was really endearing to me was the different types of formatting. So you've talked on social media about how this is a mix of, folklore and sad horror, but also found footage. And what's really interesting, and I think what really keeps us as readers diving through it, is that you mix all these different formats. There's obviously straightforward prose, but there's, voicemail transcriptions and podcast transcriptions and police reports or news headlines. Really cool. I'm wondering if you, when you originally submitted this, you did actually format all of those things differently, or if you at any point made all of it a straightforward narrative, because I would think submitting that as a writer might seem a little risky, you know?
When I first started writing Epiphany, actually, I first tried third person past, like a close third narrator. And then I realized it wasn't working because I would have to either keep so much information from the reader or cheat. I really don't like that feeling when you're reading a book and then somehow the narrator, the POV you're following should know this, but it's not telling me. Why not? Because you want to keep it from me without having the main characters, having to know it or make their minds about it. I've also said that Coral, who is one of the main characters, is an unreliable
Mhm.
narrator. So I wanted to
Very,
give
yes.
her the chance to decide whether they believe her or not. And I thought that having news reports, as you said, and the interviews and other people pitching in and talking about what happened would help the reader decide.
Mhm. It is
But
really
I didn't
cool. Yeah.
of the formatting when I submitted it was just it was all I had like chapter breaks and paragraph breaks, but I formatting was it was all way long and I love it.
Yeah, and it really makes it stand out. It's a like I said, it's a really compelling read, and all the different formatting. It really does add to exactly what you're saying. So it has that desired effect. And one of the things that really stuck with me, I told you I almost read this in one sitting. I woke up really early, cracked it open, well, on my phone, and just shot through it really fast. I couldn't stop reading it. But there is an aspect to it where you do have an unreliable narrator, but there you as a writer seem to give us as readers a lot of evidence to support the magic, but also to have us question whether any of it actually happened. So I think that was absolutely fantastic. And I'm gonna try to stop gushing over the book. Um, one aspect I wanted to ask you about with your writing is that you're an English as a second language writer, which I find very interesting because I've seen from some of your blog posts that you have tried submitting to presses in both English and in Spanish, correct? So how has that journey been for you? Do you write two versions of everything you submit?
Not anymore.
Okay, seems like a lot of work.
Yes. I started writing in Spanish because I took a writing workshop where we had to write every week. We had to write a short story, 1K, and then at the end of the workshop, I realized I had like a ton of short stories. That what am I going to do with this? And I tried submitting it to Spanish anthologies and presses, but I find the Spanish market a bit um, harsh.
Okay.
I mean, anthologies are treated more like contests.
Mhm.
Most of them are non-paying markets, and they announce their TOCs on Twitter instead of contacting the writers first.
Oh.
So it's all a bit like, no, I don't really like this.
Mhm.
So I tried to learn about the process of submitting stories in English, and I decided to try and translate some of those stories. And when the first one got accepted at Luna Station Quarterly, I said, well, it's possible, it's doable. So I kept translating some of those stories, and they were accepted at some anthologies that really blew my mind and made me realize also no, it's not only doable, but I can actually pull this out.
Yeah, well, you've been in anthologies with some really well established writers, some of which I'm excited to say are actually going to be on this podcast. I saw you were in an anthology with Angela Sylvain and Patrick Barb. You were in the Antifa Splatterpunk anthology, which learning about that, I am very excited to read it, and I think it'll be right up my alley. Was it always your intention to go from short fiction to long fiction, or were you always doing both of them back and forth? One thing I like to ask writers who do both is whether they treat their short fiction as sort of practice for longer form prose.
I don't see it as practice because I think it's, for me at least, it's a very different process to write short fiction than writing novels or novellas or longer works, because short stories are more like clockwork, and you have to make sure that everything is there for a reason and that it has a purpose and it moves the story forward. While when you're writing, or when I'm writing long fiction, I can just entertain myself on the journey, and just do stuff like I did on Epiphany, like have an email here and just a bit of information here and just another snippet there. instead of having to cram it all up to feed 3K or 5K.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal was always to write longer things. But I started with short stories, and some of those short stories are actually now, one of them is Epiphany, and another one is Spooky Lovers. So both my novellas started as short stories. Only the one that inspired Epiphany, I had the idea for the character of Stella.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry about my neighbor in case
Can't hear them at all. Promise. You're the only one that can hear them right now.
Okay, I'm the only one annoyed by them. But I had the idea for the character of Stella, but I had two different ideas, like a pregnant woman who really, really wants to be a mother, and a pregnant woman who is not sure if she wants to be a mother. So the short story that is published in What One Wouldn't Do takes one road, and Epiphany takes the other one. And it really helped me to create the character of Estela and make her a bit more round and more complex, having gone through that other road too.
Yeah, so I guess we should talk about Epiphany, right? One of the aspects I found really interesting about it is it is a book about parenthood. It's a book about sadness and loss and losing loved ones, losing children. It's a book about life and death, and it's also I have noticed that there's been a lot of horror, especially in independent cinema, that deals a lot with the horrors of motherhood. Um, and this is a book that has a very interesting twist on that perspective, where we're dealing with characters who they don't necessarily want to be pregnant, or they're on the fence about it, and they almost see it as like a means to an end, without giving too much away, because it's very interesting how both of those narratives, both with Corral and Stella, play out. So I know you've talked a lot about what led you to writing about these very, very difficult personal themes. Was wondering if you wanted to share some of that on the podcast.
Yeah, it's okay. When the first story came out, Baby Girl in What One Wouldn't Do, it's actually on the story note that I've been dealing with infertility since I was 21 years old, and I was married back then, and we wanted to have children, and we couldn't, and then we had to go through the long process of trying to finding out what was wrong, and most of the tests they do on you are painful, and it's really a tough process. And then you have to decide, is this something I want to keep putting my body through? And really ask yourself, why do I want to be a mother? Is it something I want, or is something I'm expected to do because I happen to be a cis woman and I have a uterus? you know? So I think it's important that we talk about these things, because I find that most times it's just kept as a secret, like you've done something wrong. I remember, I'm glad she doesn't speak English so I can say this. I remember my mom asking me not to tell people that we couldn't get pregnant back then. And I was like, why? Like, I haven't done anything wrong. Why can't I discuss something that just happens to me with people in the family? Why don't you want them to know? And also when someone gets pregnant, they are often expected to wait until you are in the second trimester or something to talk about it, because miscarriages can happen, and then it's another secret you have to keep. And I think I wanted to talk about all those things in Epiphany through characters that see motherhood in different lights. And also the one character that really wants to be a mother is the one that we don't get to hear from. Because I wanted to keep her, like, we don't want to hear you. Because it's that tiny voice that even when you accept that this is not going to happen, then that tiny voice is, it's still there, because you keep going to weddings or first communions, and then people ask you, because you are getting old, and then people ask you, when are you going to be a mother, and stuff like that. And it's again like a knife through the heart,
Mm-hmm.
even if I'm okay with it now,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoy my life as it is. I actually got some women reached out after Baby Girl came out on the anthology to thank me for having written about what happens when you lost a baby, even whether you want it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important, and that um, now that people with vaginas are able to write horror, I think it's actually becoming more of a topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I told you this actually hit home for me too, because my so my first child is almost 2 at this point, but I still remember those early days. Of course I didn't experience the pregnancy, I experienced for secondhand. But the aspects I do love about this book is how, the changes that you go through when you do become pregnant, it is in a way a sort of body horror, right? These are changes that you cannot control, and there's almost like you are letting yourself go, so that you can grow another human being inside you, and that is just inherently a very, when you think about it, it's kind of a horrifying thing,
Yes.
right? So that definitely resonated with me, and of course the hormonal shifts that cause some grief, some anxiety, having to deal with that along with a character who has lost somebody tragically. It's a really gut-wrenching experience, but I also think there is something pretty poignant and beautiful about the whole thing, weirdly, because I think it involves a lot of grief. So maybe I've just gotten soft during parenthood, but this made me cry quite a bit. So thank you for that wonderful experience. And I do mean that.
Thank you so
Um,
much. It means a lot. I was before people started reading the book. It obviously had been read by better readers, and but I was quite anxious about, people going to get this. It's just a me thing, you
mhm.
know.
I think there are a lot more people out there that can relate to this than you think, because as you said, I feel like and one thing I do want to ask you about is whether you've noticed it as I have, that there is a lot of I would say horror or thrillers, psychological thrillers related to childbirth and pregnancy and motherhood, especially recently. Of course there's Rosemary's Baby going back like decades, but right now, I mean, we have things like the new season of American Horror Story and a bunch of other things where there is a lot of horror related to pregnancy. And do you think that's because more people are open to talking about this now?
I think it has to do with women's reproductive rights being questioned.
Mm,
And I also think it has to do with the fact that more people are writing horror and are part of the conversation now.
mm,
And I also think there's been a shift in mothers, on how mothers talk about motherhood. You know, like they are not going to tell you it's all rainbows and flowers and everything is so happy. No, they are going to be, at least my friends are more open about the difficulties and the hard part of being a mother than my mom or my aunts were, or were allowed to be, you know, because they would be labeled as bad mothers if they dare say, you know what, I'm tired all the time.
Yeah, I always say, when it comes to parenthood, you have to prepare people for the worst. That way, best case scenario, they can be pleasantly surprised, you know. But it's so transitioning into more aspects of the book, because one thing I love about it is the folklore, and also the attention to Spanish culture. There are a lot of things in here that I think American audiences just aren't aware of, things that I actually looked up because I didn't know about sort of the Christmas adjacent celebration of Epiphany with the Los Reyes Magos. And you also talk about the myth of Lazana, I believe it's called, and the witch hunts in Spain that I didn't know about at all. We in America think about witch hunts as being specifically set in Salem, right? So could you maybe tell our American friends here, tell us a little bit about those cultural aspects of the book?
Well, I think the Reyes Magos is kind of the thing here. You know, during Christmas, we don't, it's actually more common now that people exchange gifts on Christmas morning, and we have like Papa Noel and stuff like that. But when I was a kid and in the 80s and 90s, and back then it was actually the 6th of January, kids get presents like supposedly the three wise men from the east gave the baby Jesus. And there's parades everywhere, and it's this it makes Christmases more magical when there are kids that still believe that there's three guys going around
Mhm.
that can be in the same place at the same time, just bringing you gifts. And then it's also like a core memory. Who told you? It was your parent who gave you the presents. And I remember it was a really traumatic thing for me.
Well, you actually wrote that into the book. That's a very big thing. The deception of telling kids about. I mean, the book deals a lot with magic, and especially the bad aspects of magic. And you have a child here who wises up to this idea that there's some fake magic going on here. These three wise men do not deliver gifts, and that sort of sets them on a path that's very dark, and actually leads them to real, bad magic and witchcraft, and it gets very, very dark. But I love that
It's
aspect of it
really
because
traumatic actually when you know that, then they are telling you that magic doesn't exist.
um,
So it's kind of childhood is over. There's no more magic around you. This is the boring world now. And Coral refuses to to believe that. Like, no, 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 no. What you're talking about? Magic is real. I know it's real, and I'm going to prove to everyone that it's real.
mhm. Yeah, and deception itself is a really big thing in the book, because even as readers, we don't know exactly what has happened in the end, which I feel like is a magic trick you yourself pull off quite well. So I really want everybody to read this book. Um, so one thing I like to ask authors is whether they see themselves in any of the characters. Were there any aspects of you that you put in to Estella or Corral?
I think more than aspects of me, there are experiences I went through that maybe I didn't took as bad as they did. But I think every character has some aspects of myself, because I do believe that we're all human and nothing human is alien to us, and we are all capable of doing good things and terrible things, and sometimes love makes us do some crazy shit.
Mhm.
Even if we want to believe we are good people.
Absolutely. Okay, well, moving on from Epiphany here, I do want to give you some space to talk about Spooky Lovers, which is another book that you have coming out in 2024, correct?
Yes.
And you call this a cozy horror, which from my perspective, it's a relatively new term. This is like a new phenomena in social media. For the uninitiated, could you describe what cozy horror is?
I think cozy horror is just a way of saying that even though the book might have difficult topics on it and horrible things happen, the characters maybe take it with humor, and you can fall in love with the girls in Spooky Lovers, and you would just want to go with them to a cafe, and wrap yourself in a blanket and read the book and be scared with them. And even though the stakes might be high, there's also some comfort in the way the characters deal with the horrors that are happening around them or to them. Because there are some pretty heavy things happening. Spooky Lovers is a story of two girls that fall in love through a dating app that it's called Spooky Lovers. But when they finally met, which is the start of the book, one of them is a ghost that relieves her murder time and again and again and again. And then the other girl decides, okay, I'm going to help you find out who you were, and we are going to try to stop these reenactments from happening and get justice to you and find out who you were. And but they are really funny and they love each other, and I think that's and it's ghosts and it's perfect for spooky season, and it's going to be published in English and Spanish.
It's amazing, and that's a great description. I can't wait to read it. It sounds really, really great.
I needed something lighter
I,
after.
I was gonna say that sounds that sounds a lot lighter than what I have read from you so far. So that's great. Do you sort of plan to do that with your writing career, sort of bounce back and forth between darker themes and lighter themes, or is that something that's just naturally happened so far?
I think it happened naturally, and now what I'm writing now is again back to the dark side.
Okay. Great. Well, hey, you do it well. So hey, keep doing it, you know. Um, so we have about 2 minutes left here, and I wanted to ask you if there's anything fun that you're currently watching, have watched recently, or anything you're reading that you'd like to highlight here.
I'm about to start reading. It's the next book on my TBR, Frostbite by Angela Silva, and I know you're going to talk to her.
I'm
And
gonna
I
talk
love
to her in a
her work.
week. Yes.
I love her work, and I am super excited to read this book because the cover is amazing. She's an amazing writer, and I've heard her say that she also believes it's cozy horror.
Mhm.
So I'm really eager to read that.
It's a great
Uh,
book.
I've been watching 13 Coins
Oh, okay. Very nice.
because it's my favorite Spanish director,
Mhm.
and it's really crazy. And I'm so glad that you guys can get to experience him his craziness.
Last Circus was him, right?
Was that the title in English, maybe?
Oh, okay. Yes, I believe that was the title in English. Yeah. No, he's a fantastic director. I like him quite a bit. I still haven't watched 13 Coins, so I'll need to. Yeah, I think we need to wrap it up there. But I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing some insights here. Like I said, love the book. I can't wait to read Spooky Lovers. And again, that's Epiphany, and that comes out December 9th.
Thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun.